I'm not even sure in that intro if that was a feel-good intro or not. I feel awful. Okay. I wish I knew where the mic was on this thing. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I haven't been wearing my headphones in the last little while because my PC, which I used to, that PC thing, whatever, you guys probably don't know what those are. It doesn't work anymore either. So I'm limited in my technology, and this is the way we're doing it. And Kev, thanks so much. Elizabeth, thank you. And you know what? I open up the page here, and I don't know what I'm doing one night to the next, one moment to the next. I write this stuff in my book, and I open it up, and I see a lot of people on here that I have a great affinity for. And if any of you guys remember way back when this sort of online stuff started for me, I was not comfortable with it at all. And then I developed these sort of really fun friendships with people, and some of them are on this screen right now. And so I can't help but smile. And I wish, and I know it's going to happen. And Robert, you look great, man. You look like you're ripped. I mean, get the duct tape, man. You are ripped. And it's just so good to see y'all. And to tell my story again, there are faces on here that are unfamiliar, and I don't know if there is anybody here. Kevin asked the question if there's anybody here in the first 30 days, and if you are, well, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous in this form and in this format. Trust me when I say in this room are a lot of people that care a great deal about one another, and it's because they've spent time together and we've come to know one another. And that you are welcome to join that. You are welcome to join that fellowship. And those of us, and then there was a little bit of conversation around those of us that are in our last 30 days, or maybe in our last 30 days. It's often a good thing to throw out there because, yeah, sometimes you just don't know. Somebody might be sitting right on the fence. They've been here for 12 years and they're right on the fence thinking, do I really need this? Is AA for me? Am I not? And so they might be in their last 30 days, and we can knock a little bit of sort of a spiritual sort of message into the air and hope that it lands. And anybody who's here, thank you so much for being here. You are making my Saturday night. I'm going to open by... Kevin's right. I want to share a story with you, and not because it is going to blow your mind, but because it blew my mind. About a week and a half ago, it was Tuesday night. I was on my way down to speak in a little town called Welland near Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. And it's only about 45 minutes and an hour down the road from me, but it was a Tuesday night, and it was rainy, and it was kind of dark and gloomy, and wasn't really feeling it, but I put the jacket and the tie on, and I get into the car, and I start motoring on down there in the rain, and right when I get to this exit, probably 15 kilometers, 10 miles away from where I was going to speak, I get this big puff of white smoke out in the back, and I go, oh, damn, that's not good. Then I thought maybe it was just a mist. And I go a little further, 10 kilometers further, and the car dies right on the side of the highway. And it's a highway. And it fills up with smoke inside, so even though it's pouring rain on, I got to get out of the car. I can't breathe, and the phone rings. It's one of my AA buddies asking me about the hockey tournament we're going to that weekend. And I started laughing and telling him where I am, and I look up at the sky, and I go, really? Like, I didn't really want to do this tonight, so you're going to make it extra specially hard on me, And I thought, what am I going to do now? I said, screw it. So I stuck my thumb out. I haven't hitchhiked in 40 years. I stuck my thumb out. And the first couple cars go past me, and then I got a jacket and a tie on. I'm not, I don't look like a serial killer, I don't think. And so then, but the third vehicle was a truck, and it pulls over. This young guy gets up, where you going? I said, Welland. He says, come on, jump in. He gets his hockey gear and his sticks, and he throws it in the back of the truck, and I jump in the truck, and there's him and this other young fella in there, and I said, yeah, I'm going to Welland. I said, I'm going to some place called Fitch Avenue. And he said, Fitch Avenue? He says, well, shit, that's where we're going. And he types in his GPS. Yeah, we're going to Fitch, too. I said, well, what are you guys doing going? What are you doing? And they're coming from Toronto, which is 2 hours away. And I said, well, where are you guys going? They said, it's our mom's 15th anniversary. We're trying to get there on time. I was going to speak at her anniversary. And they said, well, we didn't think we were going to get there on time. And then I said, don't worry, man, you got the speaker with you. So we made it there at 7:37. And it was like and I just left my car on the side of the road. I said, this son is done anyway. So, but isn't that, I think that's a great story personally. And there's more to it. I'll tell the rest of it off camera sometime. We got pulled over by the cops, and that never goes well. And if you know me, you know why. So that's another story. That's not quite as spiritual. I'm going to stick with this part of the story. So we are storytellers. And that was one of those things that got me in front of that room. And I talked to those two young boys in the car. They both coming from an alcohol-afflicted home. And it was very interesting to see them in the front row hearing me speak, as they're there to support their mother. And both of them were wide-eyed and jawed down when I was telling my story. And it was kind of like pretty cool, I think, that they were getting to sort of experience this kind of thing. And I hope that that might happen for somebody here tonight. Not that, I mean, you never know what I'm going to say, but the fact that there's nothing that ever can be denied about me, and that's how much I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I just love it, and there's a joyousness and a happiness and a peace and a connectedness that I have with people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I live it through the day. I contemplate it, I experience it, you know. It's just, it's how I live. And I'm much more into, these days it seems, into demonstrations of this love of this Alcoholics Anonymous program instead of just talking about it. So that's where I'm at today. And thanks again so much for having me. My name is Marty. I'm an alcoholic, member of the Prince George Group in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. You know, like a lot of people, I grew up in this home that was sort of wrought with violence and alcoholism and music and cards and fighting and forgiving, and there was beads and what do you call it, rosaries, and there was all kinds of priests and nuns around. That's the house I was in. The family, those were our family members, you know. Father Jim would be getting into a fight with my dad on the front porch after a night of playing 500. It's a card game and the fiddles, and we were just kids, and we were lapping it up. I saw alcoholism from the front row seat, and my father was an angry, violent man, and he often put his hands on my mother and had no problem putting his hands on us children. And I grew up in this fantastic life. I had no idea, you know, I just grew up in this life. I was interfered with when I was 8 years old. That's not something that sticks to me. It's not something that when I tell my story, it's like I'm gliding through this life where I'm fishing and playing hockey, and I got a host of friends, and I'm going to school, and I have a lot of friends, and I have this life. I'm angry and I fight a lot and stuff like that, but that's condoned in my family. That's not something, the rules in my home were don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Those were the rules as a young boy. And at 12 years old, I had my first drink. I had my first drink of alcohol that had any purpose or meaning. I taught all the people that I work with, you have to harken back to when alcohol had the effect. When the effect produced by alcohol you had the experience with that, that's where I get them back. You know, and when I talk about this, it's like I'm alone. I'm in my parents' home. I open the refrigerator. There's a couple bottles of beer there. I grab the first bottle of beer, take the lid off, and suck it back. Boop, 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 boop. And I slam it down, grab the other bottle of beer, and suck it back. Boop, 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 boop. You know, almost puking the whole way, making sure it gets down and not spilling it. Boop, 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 boop. And I slam it down. And I stood there and I waited. And what makes me different than anybody that doesn't have this affliction began to happen. I just started to feel okay. And I had no idea how broken and twisted and bent I was until I was straightened out. I had no idea how much pain I was in, abject pain from 0 to 12 until it wasn't there anymore. I had no idea. I had no idea how broken I was until I was repaired. And I stood there and I reveled in it. I reveled in it for about 10 or 15 minutes. And that feeling was something that I had never experienced before in my life, and I absolutely loved it. And then the room started to spin. And spin and spin and we'll stop spinning. Speeds up. I go out into the rec room and I sit down and speeds up. I go into my bedroom and I'm sitting on the side of the bed. Everything I'd ingested the last 3 days flies around the room like Kraft dinner and a hard-boiled egg and, you know, black licorice stuck in the walls. And I'm face down into the sheets, and that's it. I get up the next morning. I'm stuck in all of that stuff. It's all coated on me like bile. And I could smell ammonia in the room. It just smells like ammonia, and I'm so sick, and I feel so terrible. And I sit up on the side of the bed, and my head is pounding, thump 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 thump, and I think to myself, that was the single greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. And the thing about that first drink experience is not about the alcohol. I had lots of sips and stuff. Is when alcohol had the effect on me, that production, that effect produced by alcohol is what I sought on in my life. I didn't chase alcohol. I sought the effect produced by alcohol, and nothing else. Nothing else could produce that effect like alcohol. I tried all of the things that we don't talk about in AA. I tried all of them. But the fact is alcohol was my master. I was immediately drawn to it. At 15 years old, I'm in the basement of my parents' home for the last time. I'm bleeding out of both ends. I don't know if, I'm so sick. I got my arms wrapped around the toilet bowl and my head against that cool condensation. And again, thinking to myself, oh God, I'm going to die. And I'm never, ever, ever going to do that again. I screamed it out. It was 5:30 in the morning. I screamed that out to nobody. I'm never going to do that again. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was jacked up again. I didn't even remember what took place in the morning. Never even remember. And I talk about this when I was 17 years old because for a multitude of reasons, I think the most important of which is that I owe these people my life, these people that get up off their asses and go into these institutions and carry the message. I owe them my life. And if you do that and you think to yourself, you know what, kind of even I see Elizabeth nodding and Kevin and all you guys who post and get these meetings in play and all that kind of stuff. If you think that you're not affecting anybody or getting to anybody, trust me, I am the product of people who think outside of themselves about Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm the product of people who take this stuff seriously. So I'm 17 years old. Copper comes in and says, Cos, there's someone here to see you. And I said, who? And he said, he's a pretty big man around town. Be good to him. I walk into the room and I'm sitting down and in walks this guy. This guy's got this gray flat top brush cut. He's got these eyebrows that are way longer than they're supposed to be and they move around when he talks. He's got these deep cut lines in his face. He's got these big yellow teeth with spaces between icy blue eyes. Oh my God, terrorizing eyes. And he says, hi, I'm Bob. I got to stop describing him like that because I'm starting to actually look like him. But he says, hi, I'm Bob. And I said, well, hello, Bob. And he says, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. And I sit down and he starts telling me his story, like all 106 years. I'm 17. He's telling, like I give a shit. And he says, and I had my son on my knee, and I was going to drive my truck into the wall, and I'm like, man, it's going to be okay. He's crying, and I'm patting him on the shoulders, telling him it's going to be all right, man. And he says, and I did this, and I said, you needed to do more drinking. That's what you need to do. You didn't need to stop drinking. You needed to do more drinking. Now I don't even know why this guy's coming to see me, but he goes on and on for about an hour. And after he just sniffs, he goes, thanks for listening. And he stands up and he walks out. And I said to the coppers, I says, who the hell was that? He didn't ask me my name or didn't ask me what I was doing inside. Didn't ask if I said to the coppers, what was that? He said, those were the AAs. And I said, well, don't let those freaks in here again. And so I find out a few years. Did I freeze there? Are we frozen?
Yeah. Hold on.
Where I left off?
You left off with Bob didn't. Oh, don't let them people in here again.
Oh, so yeah, I tell the cop. Sorry, folks. I tell the copper not to let those weirdos in here again. And a few years later, and I go many years later, I am in the back of this room and I see this old guy by the coffee maker and I go up and I ask him, I recognize him as the guy who came in to see me. And I said to him, I said, Bob, I said, hi, I'm Marty. And he said, hey, how are you? And I described the circumstances. He didn't remember the story. And then when I got into some specific details about his story, he goes, oh, yeah, I remember you. And I said, well, why me? Why me that day? And he said, oh, it had nothing to do with you. He said, I was having a bad day. I drove to the joint. I said, can I have an alcoholic? And they gave me you. That's it. That's the altruism of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was having a bad day. He went to the institution, asked for a drunk, and they gave him me. Now, why is that important? Why does that ring true? Does that ring true to any of you people who have read the big book? Does that ring true? Does that sound familiar? Does it sound like the story of our co-founder in the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel? He was having a bad day. Things weren't going well. He didn't call his sponsor, Ebby. He didn't call his wife. He didn't call Dr. Silkworth. He called every name on a church directory and said the same thing. I'm a rumhound from New York and I need to find a drunk. So don't talk to me about what the answer is here in Alcoholics Anonymous, what the solution is. You know, you can tell me it's God. You can tell me it's one alcoholic with another alcoholic. That is our solution. It's always been our solution. When one alcoholic gets together with another alcoholic for the purpose of recovery, God enters the room. And there's an exposure of this power that we didn't even dream possible. And that's my Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm accustomed to. At night, that didn't get me sober. I mean, that certainly wasn't. He wasn't there to carry a message to me. He was there to, he was demonstrating an Alcoholics Anonymous endeavor. He was in pain and he found a drunk to talk to. That's it. 19 years old, I'm in a federal penitentiary because I'm making some really, really good decisions about me and my life. And, you know, I used to get framed a lot. I just to be framed all the time. You know, I never know why I was in custody. You know, I was just always framed. And now I'm in a federal penitentiary and things aren't going that well. And I want to describe myself at this point. There's a lot of levity inside of me. I joke a lot about stuff and I find humor in a lot of stuff. But I was an angry, vindictive, hateful, isolated, broken, bitter, violent piece of shit. So I want to put that out there that from 1984 to 1987, I believe I existed in what I would have called a redout. I didn't care whether they lived or died. And I saw things that, and again, no young man should have ever seen and gone through. The problem with it was I had subscribed now to it. I had ascribed to it. I had become that person. And I'm not some way out gangster or anything like that. I told you, I don't remember ever going into custody. These are insane things that took place in my life. And now I'm serving time for these things. And while in there, I'm getting bigger and badder and dumber. And it's just the way it was going. Although I became educated and all that kind of stuff, there was all kinds of stuff going on around me that I played a part in, and I'm not proud of those things today. And in 1987, so it's through a series of events, you know, there was a, you know, I don't often talk about this, but I don't know how much time I have either. How much time do I actually have from now, Kev?
Like 30 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna take a few minutes because I don't always tell this story about Steve, and some of you may have heard me talk about it before in one way, shape, or another. Again, I'm talking about the message carriers. I'm talking about the people that do this. I'm 19 years old, 20 years old, and I'm inside. And this guy, I'm in the workout pit, and this guy sort of comes into this room, and he flutters by the room. And he's putting on an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And every week he comes in and he's putting on this 100 cups of coffee and all that kind of stuff. And one day I approach him and I asked him what he was doing, and he told me. And so I went into the room over a period of a couple of weeks. I went into him and started talking to him because I said to him, why are you putting on this meeting? Like, there's nobody here. And he said, well, you're here. He'd come down to the institution to put this meeting on. And so I started having this conversation with him, and then more cons stuck their head in, and you know, they're saying, what are you doing? And cigarettes, coffee. And then there's 6 of us. And one day he comes in and he says, hey, guys, listen, I got these passes for the 13th Institutional Conference of AA at the Kingston Days Inn. Are you interested? Hi, Deb. I see you smiling. He says, are you interested? And I said, well, what is it? He said, a bunch of AAs get together. And I said, no. I heard the whole A&A thing when I was younger. No, thank you. And he said, well, there's a roast beef dinner and a dance. And I said, pardon? He said, there's a roast beef dinner and a dance. And I said, hold on, a roast beef dinner? Yeah. And a dance? Yeah. With chicks? Yeah. I'm an alcoholic, man. Help me. That was all 6 of us. All 6 of us. Hey, I'm an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. Can I come? So now all of a sudden this guy's lit up. He's got 6 of us on the hook. And I got to tell you, like, I had no idea what he was talking about, but I knew I hadn't been outside to play in a long, long time. So I ended up going back to my cell, and for a couple of weeks, however long it took before this thing was coming up, I was pretty excited. Go down and get some clothing. You know, I'm in my cell all night. I can't sleep. You know, we get up in the morning, the cells open up, all 6 of us are dressed as exactly the same. You know, going to the Anonymous conference, we jump into the big green van that says Correctional Services of Canada on it, and we pull up in front of the hotel, and all you weirdos are standing out there with your styrofoam cups and your cigarettes aplenty and big puff of blue smoke. You know, if anybody ever wanted to hit us, we'd never be hard to find, you know what I mean? And so, and we're all strapped together on these chains, and I'm the lead guy, and I go to step off the goose, and I go down, and all the guys pile on top of me. And all you weirdos are standing there going, welcome, welcome. Like, you don't even see the handcuffs and shackles. It's like, it was this undeniable sort of weirdness to me. And so we get into past these things. We walk into the room, and there's like, when they open up the doors, there's like 10 million people in that room. And it's a new guy experience. And you guys will remember that if you had it. You walk in, it doesn't matter. I mean, I know that there was only 250, 300 people in that room. But when they opened the doors, there was 10 million. And my heart started to pound, and everything, I began to sweat, and everything. I recognize today I may have been having my one and only panic attack that I can ever remember. But I had nothing to treat that. I had no alcohol, nothing to treat that. And so I walked across the room, default, mad dog, and pulling my shoulders back, putting my chest out, and everybody out in the room as I passed them, stay away from me, stay away from me, stay away from me. I got all the way to my chair, made it safe, took a deep breath, and sat down. The guy who was chairing the meeting, he got up at some point in the afternoon, and he said, is there anybody, his name's Keith Funt. And some of you from the northern states might remember him. He was a pretty prominent Alcoholics Anonymous member who helped a lot of men up that way. And he said, is there anybody out there on a day parole pass? And well, 15 or 20 of us stood up, and all you strangers clapped. You just clapped. Again, very weird. And then he said, is there anybody out there who's ever done time? Could you please stand up? The chairs squeaked across the floor, and everybody in the room stood up at the same time. It was like this whoosh. And I'm standing there thinking to myself, oh, no, it was like a vacuum, guys. It was like a vacuum. It's like I sucked in like a vacuum. It's like, not this, not the AAs. These aren't my people. No way. Come on. Really? These are my people. And I got to tell you, it was a defeated feeling. I was all polished up and good to go and ready for the dance. And I was a defeated feeling. And I was sitting there mulling in that feeling, just sort of just moping in that feeling. And the speaker gets up after the dinner. His name's John A. And he says the same stuff that Bob guy said to me and then I said, man, you needed more drinking, brother, not less. You needed more. And then they have the dance. They start to hear the cymbals. I hear the stuff, the band starting to get set up and all. And I start thinking about daytime drinking, all the daytime drinking I did. That was when I would start to come alive. Right at the end of the day, when dusk would come and music would start, and I would start to come alive. And I began to have that feeling inside, and I start scoping the room for her. I'm looking for her. I found her, but that's a story for another day. I don't know where I was going to take her. I don't know. We were under escort. We were all there under escort. I don't know what I was going to do, but yeah, he was. And then Steve flutters up behind me and says, are you ready to go? I said, go where? He said, back to the institution. I said, what about the dinner? What about the chicks? What about the dance? He says, I lied. So I have my first resentment. I got my first solid resentment that I am aware of. I get back into the van, and all my buddies are pissed. Like, we're pretty angry. This guy hooked us. He got us pretty good. And we get back in the van, and I'm just angry. And I go back to the institution. I'm telling all the guys what I'm going to do to him when he comes in on Wednesday. This was on a Sunday. What am I going to do to him when he comes in on a Wednesday? And he comes in, and I had this bravado, all this shit inside of me, and I'd shot off my mouth. Now I had to act. And when he turned around and my eyes met his eyes, we just started to laugh. And I commended him. I commended him for getting us. I didn't understand a lot of what they were talking about, but I said to him, I felt something there, man. Something happened. You guys all stood up, and we all stood up together. And I said to him, his name was Steve. He was a square John. I said, you've never done time. But for some strange reason, when we all stood up together, I felt like you and I were the same. It was a weird feeling. And he said, well, AA, this and that, and started talking. And I'm going, well, I'm not interested in the AAs. And he said, there's our steps right up there in the wall. I've been in that room for 3.5 years. And I had never, ever looked at what it said, because everywhere it said God and the steps, it was embossed. So I thought that was for the Jumping for Jesus crew, and that had nothing to do with what I was doing my time for. And I look up and I start looking at those steps, and I think to myself, yeah, step 1, drinking bad. Step 2, no, we're not going there. We're not doing that whole G thing. That's not happening. Step 3, you're not even hiding it anymore. It's capital G. You're not hiding it behind power or anything. It's capital G. You're not even hiding it in step 3. Step 4, do inventory. I did some horrible things. I can do that. I'm not writing anything down, but I can do that. Step 5, don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. I'm not breaking the rule. You don't do that. You don't tell anybody your stuff. I'm not doing step 5. Step 6 and 7, defects of character, shortcomings, still hardly understand it today. Step 8 and 9, I'm not paying back the money. Whoever came up with that idea is ridiculous. That's never going to happen. I'm not paying back the money. Step 10, again, the mystery of all Alcoholics Anonymous in life, in my eyes, belie in step 10. Hopefully get a chance to mention it. In step 11, there you are. That's what you were going for since the beginning. You're looking for that the whole time. You wanted me jumping for Jesus since the beginning. I'm going to be on the corner of James Street and King Street in Hamilton with big books of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, praise the Lord, praise Jesus. I knew that's what you're going for. In step 12, help people. Well, I can do that. So I had a 1, 4, and 12 program. And I ran around the institution and told everybody there they could have what I had if they just did what I did. And nobody got sober. Nobody. But I didn't drink or take any other substances. And for some strange reason, after several months, my parole was reinstated. My sentence was reduced on appeal, and I come out of the institution to a halfway house here in Hamilton. And that was sometime around May, June in 1987. And I was angry, 245 pounds of rage. I was pissed off all the time. I had a way of acting that had nothing to do with my insides. My insides never matched my outsides. I had no alignment in my life about where this was going. I was back on the street, not drinking. And for 2 weeks, it went pretty good. You know, it went pretty good. I had a good 2 weeks, like most new guys just not drinking have. It was about 2 weeks. I got 14 days out of that not drinking trip. And about the 14th, 15th day, I started thinking to myself, you know, Marty, when you went into that institution, you know, all your buddies and stuff like that, they have those, now they're, what do you call that when you get a lunchbox and they got jobs, they got those job things, and families, they got families, you know, when you go home, people say hello to you, they got jobs and they got families. And I thought, well, I should have those things. I should have those things too. So I went to this strip club down on Highway 20 in between Hamilton and Stony Creek because I knew I could get those things that afternoon. And when I walked in, the waitress, like Roland Hazard, the stewardess, the waitress asked me the question that I don't have an answer for. And you guys, listen up. I am a non-drinker. I don't drink. I'm in an alcohol treatment program. If I drink again, I'm going back to federal prison. And I go in there to get a family and a job. I got my zoot suit on. I got my tie and my bowler tie, my orange shirt. I got hair all slicked back. I went down there in a city bus because I'm so cool. And when I walk in, she says, would you like anything from the bar? I got one answer. I said, bring me a Jack and an X. And as she turns around to walk away, new guy, I don't start thinking to myself, hey, I better get the hell out of here. Trouble's a brewing. I start thinking to myself, I wonder what parent institution I'm going to get returned to. Oh, I'm getting all animated again. So, stiffen up there. So, what parent institution I'm going to get sent to? I wonder if I can get my job back. I wonder who they're going to put me in a cell with. That's what I start thinking. Because once I start drinking, I cannot stop. What makes me alcoholic, of the type of alcoholic I am, is when I start drinking, I cannot stop. And the bigger piece is that I will always start drinking. And this is what makes me the alcoholic that needs you and Alcoholics Anonymous and a power. So this is where I'm at. I don't know any of this stuff at that time. I'm off and running. I can't stop when I start. My parole gets suspended for 2 weeks. I'm in this institution. Again, telling everybody around me who will listen what I'm going to tell these guys when they come in to see me. They come in to see me. I tell them that blow. I go back into the cell. And I could tell something bad was going to happen inside of me. Like something was going to happen. And I asked them if I could get in my cell, and they let me in my cell. I looked out the window and I saw those two guys from AA who had shared their stories with me. They were the guys who were coming in to bring me back to the halfway house, and I told them to get lost. They had shared their stories with me, very similar to mine, desperate and you know, these kinds of things. And I identified with them, with their stories. I had such a hatred for myself, I couldn't cross to shore. It's unstable again. Good? We still good?
Yeah, we're all right now.
Okay. So I see these two guys walking across the parking lot, and I lose my mind. I'm in the cell, and I start flipping out. I screaming and yelling. I grab everything I can get my hands on. I'm ripping it apart, all my worldly possessions, like my comb and my toothbrush. You know, I'm breaking everything I can get my hands on. And I screamed when I hit the floor and I hit the concrete. I screamed out, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live like this anymore. And I screamed it out. I didn't want to scream it now in case I'd blow your eardrums, but I screamed it out. And from the bottom of my guts, it came out of my mouth. And I heard a voice say, you don't have to. You don't have to live like this anymore. And that was July the 16th, 1987. Now, what happened on the floor that day was that whatever weight had been on me, whatever weight I had in me and on me was removed. I just screamed out for help, and the help came. I didn't see a room fill up with light. I had a chest and a head that filled up with light. I stood up and I was almost like I was floating. It was almost like my feet weren't touching the floor. I felt like all of that anguish and rage and anger was gone. I asked him to bring the copper back. He comes back. I said, please ask Bruce to come back. He said, he's not coming back after what you just said. And I said, please call him back. And 15 minutes later, I was on his couch, on the street, ready to do it again. Now, this is where my Alcoholics Anonymous life starts to really take a hold. I've never not loved you guys. I've loved AA from the day that you ever showed yourself to me. But now I need you. And I start going to Alcoholics Anonymous on a daily basis, a couple of times a day. I don't like the idea of work. I don't. I'm going to AA all the time. I love meetings. I love you guys. I love hanging out with you guys. And this is what starts to happen. And, this, while I was on that couch that day, this big Scottish guy stuck his head in the door and he says, hey, Martin. And I said, hi, how are you? And he says, I'm your sponsor, son. And I said, well, what? He said, I'm your sponsor. And I said, well, hang on a second. I know I've been drunk in AA for a little while, but how come I don't get to ask someone to be my sponsor? He says, you're too stupid. And I said, hey, buddy, relax a little bit there, champ. I said, and I was thinking, I'll kick you in the, and I'll run it. And out of my mouth came, okay. And he says, and we're going to go to meetings every day for the rest of your life. And I said, hey, whoa, Chuck, I was on my way to get a family and get some work when I was interrupted. And out of my mouth came, okay. And for the next 5 years, I was in that guy's back pocket. For your people who are in Alcoholics Anonymous, and a lot of these Zoom calls and people and players on here are connected now, and we talk a certain language. But there are still lots of people out there that don't understand what I'm about to say, and I'm going to throw it out there because here's my AA life. In those first 5 years, I went to tons of meetings. I read your literature. I belonged to a group that I had the keys to. I could go down there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd shoot a ball downstairs. I'd play hockey in the basement, set up the meeting. A couple people would show up. I'd tear it down, and I'd go back to the institution. And the next day, I'd go to the area social club. And I spent my first 3 Christmases with you guys. I wasn't permitted back to my family's place. It wasn't okay. So Alcoholics Anonymous was a major player in my life. I went to dances. I loved AA. It was everything. All my new friends, I became very well known in AA because of all the meetings I was going to. I was asked to speak a lot. I loved to laugh. And I thought if you lit up a room with laughter, Alcoholics Anonymous's primary purpose wasn't far behind. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I just knew that people who laughed at themselves seemed to stick around a little longer. So laughter was a big part of it. So I'm going through this AA life. I'm knocking on my sponsor every day at 4:30 dinner with him to go into a meeting. When in Rome, you come into Alcoholics Anonymous and you do what those that are there are doing. And so for all those years, I'm having this sort of life, but all the while I have a nefarious sort of penchant for women and girls. And I have a penchant for lying and stealing and robbing. But I'm not drinking. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not drinking. I'm blowing up people's cars for income. And it's okay. At least you didn't drink today. My bar was pretty low. At 5 and 6 and 7 years sober, I had this. I could become educated. I go to school, and now I'm involved in sort of a career aspirational sort of momentum. And I had this little girl. In one of my nefarious relationships, I have a little girl, and she's beautiful. And at 6 months old, I'm looking after her. Couldn't make the relationship work. Shock, shock, shock. I have this beautiful little girl, and she's laying on the floor, and I'm looking in her eyes, and she's looking in mine. For the first time, I knew what it felt like to be loved. I could see it. I could recognize it. I had never seen it before. I knew my mother loved me, but I had never seen this before. And I'm looking at her, and I'm feeling it going that way, too. And I had never felt that before. So I know that Alcoholics Anonymous is not about not drinking, and it's not about means. It's all about love. Alcoholics Anonymous is all about love. It's always been about love. So I start running around for meetings and love, 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 and that's my talks. If you hear my old tapes, it's all about love. Alcoholics Anonymous and sobriety recovery is all about love. It's a beautiful thing. Bed Bath & Beyond gift bags for anniversaries. It's all about the love. And I'm having this great AA experience, right? It's now elevated into a whole new realm. And then I meet a couple of these guys who are talking about God. Capital G God. God. And I think, is there something there? And I start investigating. Sure enough, I began to field season. Now I'm involved in sweetgrass ceremonies, religious ceremonies. I'm involved in all kinds of experiences around Christianity, and I'm so enjoying the run, and I'm going to different churches and feeling them out. I'm godparent to a number of children in different faiths. This was a period of my life where capital G began to mean everything, and I knew that it wasn't about love. Oh my God. And it wasn't about not drinking. It's all about God. It's always been about God. God, 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 God. You know, we're talking like it's all about God. I'm having this major league God experience. And 14 years sober. I'm the closing speaker, I'm the spiritual speaker on the Sunday at a closing up a conference where the main banquet speaker and I were out having cigarettes, shooting a shit. And he's telling me a little bit about himself, and I'm telling him everything about myself. I'm telling him what a great AA member I am, how I run AA in Canada. If you just need to know anything about AA in Canada, you just look me up. I am the man. There's no doubt about it. And I'm at 14 years. I've had every experience Alcoholics Anonymous there is to have. And at some point in the conversation, the diatribe of mania egoism that I was describing for this guy, he, through the big cloud of smoke, says, "You're asleep dreaming you're awake." And I said, "Pardon?" I knew it was an insult, but I'm not that bright. He said, "You're asleep dreaming you're awake." I said, "I don't know what you're talking about, buddy, but explain that to me." He says, "I can tell there's an experience in AA you've never had. Do you want to shine light on it?" He says, "Yeah, you've never taken the steps." And if you guys were listening to my story, that's my story. There were no steps. There were no people taking people through the steps. There was no big books to be found. They were not in the area and the environment that I was in. And if you're from Hamilton and you come to me after this meeting at some point and say, "Oh, Marty," just remember, if you took the steps in 1987 to 1995, 1998, if you did, and you kept a secret, shame on you. You didn't... I've been around this town for 35 years now, so whatever you were doing back there didn't show up, right? So don't come on to me afterwards. This was pretty normal. This was pretty normal for not just for the area I was in, for how about North America? You know, there are many, many great speakers in Alcoholics Anonymous who can attest to this very experience. And I'm going to tell you something right now. It doesn't make anybody wrong or bad. It's about when in Rome. So I spoke last night at a meeting that just came in Cambridge, Ontario, not far from here. And a guy came up to me when I walked in the room. He's 35 years sober, and he says, "I heard you speak 4.5 years ago on Zoom. I heard you speak 4.5 years ago." I think he said 4.5 years ago. And he said, and I had never heard anything about the steps. I'm 35 years sober. I had never heard anything about them. He said, I never had the experience. And he said, since that time, I've been pushed into this experience around the steps, and my life is lit up. 35 years sober. That's last night. I had that. So don't, for as many knuckleheads that come up and tell me, it's like, "Oh, Marty, you just missed the boat," or we were... I don't even know. Some of the things I've heard are ridiculous. You would laugh if you heard them. They're ridiculous. Anyhow, not necessary. I don't want to split a room. There are those that take the steps, and there are those that don't. And the ones that don't think the ones that do are in a clique, and we are. And it's okay. It's okay, because you're welcome in that clique. It's just a language. I don't give a shit if you take the steps or not. One of my favorite guys in all of AA is an old guy named Tony in my group. I hope he hears this recording, because he loves when I mention his name. And he came up to me. This guy's 46 years sober. And one night he brings a drunk guy into the room, and me and Brian are doing our thing in our workshop. He brings a drunk guy into the room, and at the end of the meeting, the drunk guy got nothing. I think the drunk guy passed out during the meeting. Tony's jaw was sitting on the table, and we're leaving the room. We set the whole thing up. He tugs in the back of my shirt. He's an old rounder, and he just kind of out of the side of his mouth, he says, "You know, Marty, I think I'm one of those guys you're talking about." I said, "Oh, Tony, of course you are. You've never taken the steps." He says, "No, I haven't." He said, "I don't even know what that means." And he's 46 years sober. And I said, "Tony, if I was scouring the earth for a father, I'd pick you. You're one of the nicest men I've ever met." Not sure he ever needed to take the steps, but AA was good to him, and he's been good to it. And he's one of my favorite guys in AA. I love him. I don't boot anybody out. I'm not kicking anybody out of AAs. People need to stop that stuff and say that's not what I'm doing. And it's not what I'm doing. My old guy 30 years ago said to me, he says, "You got a job in AA, and it's just the comfort to disturb and disturb the comfortable." And I don't know why I have that effect on people, but it just seems to be the case. It's just always a disturbance. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, Robert? Just disturbing people everywhere I go. So what ends up happening, though, is Mark. So we have this conversation, and Mark calls me on it. And he says, "If you want some help with it, I give you help now." And I thought it was blasphemy. He said he was going to take me through the steps. And I said, "Man, like, you've got a few hours, buddy." But he said, "Come on, let's go." I followed him up into the room, and in a hotel room. As soon as the door closed, he qualified me as an alcoholic for the first time. I had never been qualified. I just walked into AA rooms and you let me come in and sit beside you and say, my name's Marty, I'm an alcoholic. You never questioned whether that was true or whether that was whether I was, you never did. Nor should you. I don't know if you should. I'm just saying, you never did. Now he did. He said, tell me about powerlessness. And he said, he's the one that gave me, you can't stop when you start and you can't stop starting. It was the first time I'd ever heard that's what the qualifications for an alcoholic is. It has everything to do with alcohol and very little to do with the rest of what we're going to talk about. Powerlessness is the only issue in AA. You either are or you aren't. Your life is unmanageable by you. Your life is unmanageable by you. And he said, I just listened to you talk out there for 45 minutes and you've got a life based on self. And you've had some success, no doubt, which will delude you into believing that you do in AA. And you get asked to speak all over the place because of this message you're carrying. And it's not an AA message, but it is what it is. And he says, do you even believe in God? And I said, well, of course I do. And I described to him my God. And it was a Bush League pinch hitter God, exactly the way it's described in step 7. Is that I call God when I get in trouble. I yell out to God when I get in trouble. When bad stuff happens, I yell at God. That's my relationship with God. My relationship with ego is that every time I get out of trouble or every time something goes good, I take the credit. And that's how I'm living my sober life for 14 years. I sponsor 40 men. I run meetings. I run groups. I talk. I speak everywhere. And that's how I'm living my life. He calls me on it. And he says, your proposition's later on in the step. God is either everything or else he's nothing. Everything or nothing. What's your choice? And that's when I broke. I started to cry. I began to weep. And I couldn't get the words out. And I just said, it has to be everything. I just mumbled the words out. It has to be everything. And he says, selfishness, self-centeredness, that's the root of your troubles. 10 minutes, buddy. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that's what's going on with you. And I'm thinking to myself, where's he getting this shit? He said, would you say a prayer with me? He swats the coffee table out of the middle of the room and he gets down and he hunkers over me. He's a big man. And he says, God, I offer myself to thee. And I say, God, I offer myself to thee. And he says, to do with me, as whatever it is, do whatever. You know how. What does it say? To build with me and do with me as thou wilt. I said, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. And I'm thinking to myself, where is he getting this stuff? Inside him, I'm going, where's he getting this stuff? It's amazing. And I'm sobbing. I start crying. I can hear the words of the prayer. And then I stand up. Thanks, Elizabeth, for getting me back on point there. So anyway, so what happens is I come out of that experience when I'm wondering where he's getting this stuff. I stand up, and again, I feel free. Something's happened inside of me. I'm 14 years sober, and something's happened inside of me. It wasn't this sense that I was doing it wrong, which people hear me say a lot. It wasn't that. It was this sense that I had not been doing it at all, and that there was so much more here to be had. And so I walked out of that room a different man and set on inventory, and that was Mark Houston, and many of you guys know who he is. We talk about him. We hold his memory in great reverence, and we share his message. And I went and I did that inventory, shared it with another alcoholic. I went into 6 and 7 with a whole different perspective. Nature of my wrongs, defects of my character, shortcomings I gave to God. I gave things to God. Do we bring up here? Am I frozen right now?
No, you're good.
So I give these things to God. In steps 8 and 9, I'm 14 years sober, and for the first time, I'm going back to people in very close to me and making amends just the way I was directed to make them. And it was quite amazing because people would think like we were pretty good, but I had washed all the stuff away in the past that I had done and that I had experienced with them that I needed to clear up. And my life began to take on a whole new meaning. This whole thing about this whole new meaning is not it may be understated by us, because I went from, when they talk about the scrap heap of life and placed into this position, oh my God, like I wish you could understand. I'm talking about a full pardon. I'm talking about 4 children. I'm talking about 4 grandchildren. I'm talking about I own a home. My mom at 5 years sober was bragging to the rest of the family members that I had a car that had the same license plate on the front as the back. You know, I've come a long way. And the thing about these steps is that you know, I'm not going to have time to dive into the 10th step the way I like to, but I want to be clear that I believe all the secrets to good living are tied into the 10th step. That we have an opportunity through this understanding and practice of this 10th step, that no matter how grave the pain and how grave the difficulty, you know, when my daughter hung herself, or when my oldest daughter had 3 primary cancers, and we're battling it still today, these things that go on in our lives that we think are unbearable and insurmountable. And I've got to tell you, I'm not on the other side of these things grieving. I'm just not. I'm not saying there was no grief. And my daughter who hung herself didn't die, by the way. We still grieve her because she's never been the same. She's on the streets as we speak. But the idea is that I love her. I take her for ice cream. I bring you guys with me. We all take her for ice cream. You know what I mean? Life isn't about the circumstances of my life. It's about the power that's been put inside of me to meet these things. And if I reject that power and I approach life with self, it's a battle. And I constantly try to seek in this 11th step a connection with that power that will work in that 10th step over and over and over again. I don't know how I landed on that beautiful 10th step thing. And the idea though is, so what happens sadly is my guys aren't allowed to have problems anymore. The guys I work with can't have problems. You know, they can be going through something and something can crop up, but they can't have problems anymore. And because you guys right here and then shut up, and I hope I don't freeze up here, because it'll only have an effect if I continue through it. There's 161 people on the screen. I lost 70 of them. There's a lot more than that a little while ago. But if I asked you right here, right now, what was wrong with your life, right here, right now, in this moment, you'd have to say nothing. You'd have no option. But what just quickly cropped up into your mind is the ego's story about what's going on in your life. And reminding you that, no, you're in big trouble. You're a piece of shit. You lied. You're having an affair. You cheated. Your ego runs back up to quickly dissect this moment. But in this moment, the 10th step, everything is perfect. So really our primary objective as spiritual beings is to get into that moment and to stay in that moment as much and as often as we can. And my deal isn't always being on the beam. My deal today is how quickly I get back on the beam when I get knocked off. And sometimes I'm really good at it. And sometimes I'm not any good at it. But all times I'm in the place that I can try. All times. All of this experience becomes my message in the 12th step to help people. From the time that they're trying to get sober, if you've been in my home group, I'll welcome you in with loving arms and try to set a table for you that you'll be comfortable at. And that's it. That's what I try to do. And I bring that 11th step experience, those experience of those 11 steps into my daily interactions with alcoholics. Now, when I said at the beginning, I want to say again, I want to be a demonstration of this stuff. I don't want to know a lot about it. I don't want to talk a lot about it. I don't want to quote the big book. I don't want to live by the quotations in the big book. I want to be a demonstration of what it is to live by that information. I want to be a demonstration of it. I wanted somebody to say, you know, like if you ask my wife, she'll say, 60%. 60% of what he says about himself is true. He's full of shit. He thinks much more of himself than I will ever think of him. She'll tell you that. And it's all good. I think 60 is pretty good. You know, where I'm coming from, I think 60 is pretty good, you know? And if you're a major league batter, you'd be a multi-billionaire, you know? So I think 60 is pretty good. So that's how I'm running things today. I miss you guys, man. I miss you so much. And thanks so much for having me, Kevin. Thanks for all your work, brother. I appreciate it.